everybody, and welcome to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Today is Friday, and we have a very special episode planned for you today. Of course, I'm Chelsea Late, and if you watch this podcast or listen to it on a regular basis, you know that I am up in Toronto and very excited about the Toronto Tempo entering the WNBA in 2026. But as we know, there is another team entering the WNBA in 2026 as well, the Portland Fire. And so we thought it would be fun to come and have a little bit of a expansion kind of chat with someone in Portland. And so Sean Highkin is here to chat all things Portland, Toronto expansion 2026 with all of us. And so, Sean, to get us started and introduce our listeners to you, I want to hear your true, honest thoughts about the name Portland Fire coming back and the logo that they have designed.
I think it's fine.
Fine.
I know there are I know that there was some controversy around it when it was first announced.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, actually, I think they didn't want to originally bring back the Portland Fire name. I don't think that was the plan the whole time.
Yeah.
And I don't think there was like a reason for it. I think they just wanted to kind of be their own thing. Just because there is a lot of nostalgia for the original Portland Fire. Like you'll still see Jackie Stiles jerseys around town somewhere and from time to time. And there is some nostalgia for it, but it's not like you're bringing back like the Houston Comets where they won a bunch of championships back in the early stages of the league. Like the Fire existed for 3 years. They never won anything. They never made the playoffs.
Ooh.
So it's not like it's not like it's like this beloved thing that they were bringing. So I think I could understand why they kind of wanted to, be their own thing.
Yeah.
What I think happened was a lot of the names that they wanted were copyrighted and they just couldn't get them. So they ended up just falling back on the Fire. And there were certainly, there was, some local media outlets and also, a contingent of fans that were not in favor of the name because this region has had a lot of wildfires in the last few years. It's had a lot of devastation. And, I can certainly understand where some of that's coming from, but I think overall, like, it's a good name.
Mm-hmm.
I think people liked it more once they saw the logos that they came out with. Like, I think the color scheme, first of all, it looks a lot different from
the original.
Like, it's not like if you go back and look at the original looked like it was created on like Microsoft Paint or something. It was not a like very sophisticated logo. The new one, I don't love the P, like the stylized P. I don't love that. But the rose with the flame on it, I think is
cool.
Really sharp. I really like the font. I like the color scheme. I think they did a good job overall with the branding.
Yeah, I mean, going back to names and that whole thing, I mean, I was someone very in tune with the naming process when it came to the Toronto Tempo. And yeah, the fact that literally everything these days is copyrighted and it's so hard to come up with a team. I remember when the Tempo or when the name was leaked.
When they put it on the website, the website on a drop-down menu. That's tough.
What a way to do that. But anyway.
They did a whole podcast of going through all the names they thought about, and they didn't. Yeah. Like I listened to that. They really like took you through the whole process in a way that Portland didn't. It was like with Portland, it was like, I had been hearing for months that it was probably going to be a Fire, and then there were these, copyrights that they filed a couple of weeks before the thing that kind of made it look like it was heading that way, and then they had the announcement, and that was about it.
Yeah. But, it was the league itself that leaked the Tempo. But when people were, like, mad about it, I was like, okay. First of all, I kind of knew what was in the running, just based on conversations I'd had with people. And so I was like, first of all, if you knew some of the other names that were being tossed around, we got it good. And then the other thing was, like, everything is copyrighted. Like, you have all these ideas for names, but, like, you can't use any of them. And so the idea to try and come up with something that's like original, good for a team, fits with the location, et cetera, and be something that you can legally use is so hard.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that was just kind of my thing where when the name was leaked was like, okay, like everybody kind of needs to think about, we're like, it's not 1997 anymore. We can't just like name things whatever we want. And then there's like this weird thing in Toronto where you probably understand this in Portland as well, where like the team is not linked to the NBA team
Right.
in our region. So like people were like, why doesn't it match the Raptors? And I'm like, because it's two very separate things. It can't match. So yeah, it's just like there's so many things that go into these naming things that like once I started researching more about it, I'm like, I would not want to do this myself.
Right. Well, the thing is, back in the day when the Portland Fire the original Portland Fire came into the league in 2000, a few years after the league was founded,
Yeah.
the all of the teams were still owned and co-operated with NBA counterparts. There was no, like right now there's the Las Vegas Aces that are in a city that doesn't have an NBA team, and like the
Yeah.
Connecticut Sun that are in a place that doesn't have an NBA team, and
Hmm.
even some of the teams that are in cities that do have NBA teams like the Chicago Sky and the Dallas Wings, they're not owned by the NBA ownership group.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case back in the day, and that's why a lot of the original WNBA teams had names, and some of those teams that still exist still have those names that are, very much tied to their NBA teams. Like there's the
Yeah.
Wizards, the Mystics, there's the Timberwolves and the Lynx.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was the Orlando Magic and the Orlando Miracle, the Charlotte Hornets and the Charlotte Sting.
Yeah.
That stuff is not really like it was around. And actually, the reason that the Fire folded originally in 2002, the team actually was pretty well attended. I think they were getting around 8,000 fans a game at
Yeah.
their games, which at the time, for where the W was at the time, was they were one of the better attended teams in the league. But
Yeah.
they were still losing money because the whole league was losing money. And what happened in 2002 was that they reverted ownership, because it was that the all the teams were just owned by the league. They weren't
Mhm.
owned by the individual owners. They were just tied to sister franchises.
Yeah.
They changed the ownership structure in 2002 to be that the NBA team owners in each of these cities would just get also now, hey, you now own the WNBA team too, and
Yeah.
then the owners could just decide whether they wanted to keep them or sell them or fold them.
Yeah.
Most of them, and that's why a lot of those teams folded,
Yeah.
because the owners were like, I don't want to lose money on this, so we're just gonna fold it and not even try to sell it to a outside buyer to try to keep it going. They were just like, yeah, whatever. This isn't really a big thing. We're just gonna fold it. So that's what happened to the Fire. But now this new group coming in, the Bethal family, who,
Hmm.
and I know that the Tempo ownership group is a Raptors minority owner, right? But it's not.
Yeah. Well, not for long, but yeah.
But it's like but so he's like has like some connections to the Raptors, but it's not like
Yeah.
it's not like MLSE is owning the Toronto.
No, no, no. It's him and his own kind of
Right,
his
right,
own business section that he
right,
has
right,
in him.
right. So with the Portland ownership group, originally it was going to be this guy Kirk Brown, who
Mhm.
was the co-founder of a business data analytics company called Zoom Info. They were going to announce it, like he got the bid, he was going to get it.
Yeah.
And they were going to announce it about a month after they announced Golden State in the
Yep.
fall of 2023. Like it was done. Like there was a date for a press conference to announce
Yeah.
it.
Well, that was the whole thing at the time because they were saying 2 teams were coming out. Golden
Yeah,
State was confirmed, and then we're like, maybe Toronto, and then MLSC backed out, and then it was Portland that
right,
everybody thought, because I remember at the time being like, "Oh, damn, like, Toronto's not gonna get a team for another, like, 5 years now."
right. No, because I remember that too, because like by February of 23,
Mhm.
there was this big event that was held in Portland with
Yep.
a bunch of like local political power
I remember
brokers,
that.
lasers, and Thorns and Timbers executives, and
Mhm.
basically people hosting Kathy Engelbert,
Mhm.
basically to try to make the case for why Portland should get a team. And I mean, the case for why Portland should get a team and why Portland would be a great WNBA city is pretty obvious. But
Yep.
uh, what I heard around the time was that they did want to, that Portland might be like third in line because they wanted to add 2 teams, and the Bay Area was obviously going to be one of them.
Yeah.
And the league really wanted to expand into Canada because they had just done those I think they had just done that first
First
exhibition
one.
game, and it
Mhm.
sold out right away in Toronto, and
Yeah.
it was like, okay, well, we want to be international, we want to go into Canada, we want to replicate what the Raptors have there, where they're the official team of an entire country, like we want to do that, and so I kind of figured, okay, it's going to be Portland and Toronto, and then yeah, when MLSE backed out of it, then Toronto, like Portland was going to get it, but then this guy Kirk Brown, who didn't really have any, he didn't have any NBA connections. But from what I understand, he just was, he lives in Las Vegas full time. And from what I understand, is he's just a Aces season ticket holder and a huge WNBA fan. And the idea was that he was going to buy the team and he was going to,
Got money, we'll make a
pour a lot of
WNBA
money
team.
into it. Yeah, exactly. And what happened, from what I understand, like they said, like when Kathy, it was so funny because when Kathy announced that they were not going to, or she wrote that letter to one of our senators to say that, oh, because of the uncertainty around the arena renovations, it's when we're gonna defer. By the way, the Moda Center renovations still haven't been fully decided yet. Like so that was clearly not what it was. What it actually
Yeah.
was that Kirk Brown's company had its stock price fall by like 50% within the like year between when he said he wanted the team and when he would have had to actually put the money up. So he kind of just didn't have the money for it anymore. And so that's actually why it ended up not happening. But one thing that I heard, and you want to talk about names, but one of the things that I think he had some disagreements with Kathy about was that he was really, really set on calling the team the Rose City Royalty, which is terrible.
Yeah, no, that's not a good
And
name. Because you
so
already have, like, Portland Thorns, you have,
so
like
I think Kathy didn't like the king royal queen. Like I think she didn't like that kind of connotation. I just think it's a dumb name. I also think that
yeah,
calling something Rose City instead of like just saying Portland, like you could do
Portland.
that for a minor league team. Like I guess Golden State's a little bit of an exception, but like
Yeah, but they have the Warriors, so there's precedent.
right, and it's also with the Warriors, it is the same ownership group, so it does
Yeah.
make sense to have Warriors Valkyries as like a sister thing because it is the same ownership
Yeah,
group. They're very
exactly.
much branded as like sister franchises and
Yeah.
stuff. But so that original bid falls apart,
Yeah.
and around the same time that bid falls apart, the Bethal family, who are minority owners of the Sacramento Kings, buys the Thorns from Merritt Paulson. I don't know how much you remember about that or how much
Yes.
you were following it, but there was this
Yeah.
whole abuse
Yeah.
scandal where
Yeah.
one of the Thorns coaches was, sexually abusing some of their
Yeah.
players, and the owner of the team, who also owned the Timbers, like knew about it and didn't do anything about it and didn't fire the guy. And it was one of those types of things. And so he should have had to sell both teams, obviously,
Yeah.
but he didn't. But he just sold the Thorns. And so the Bethals bought Thorns
Mhm.
around the same time that the WNBA bid that was going to get put through ended up falling apart.
Yeah.
So they get to Portland and they're like, hey, there's interest in a WNBA team here. They were going to get a team. The bid fell apart. We've got the money. Like, let's see what's going on with this. Let's at least talk about it. And then over the next 6-7 months or so, they were talking about it. And there was another group that was also talking about it that was, I believe, led by the ownership group of Angel City in the NWSL.
Yep.
So there were two different groups that were talking about, wanting, to bring a WNBA team to Portland. And that was like around the same time that the Toronto bid that ended up going through actually went through. And so they announced Toronto. But I kind of thought there was still, a chance because Kathy had said they wanted to get from 12 to 16 teams by 2028.
Yeah.
So
That was around the time that it was like, okay, we're not talking about 1 or 2 more teams. We're definitely talking about way more.
Right. And so around that time they were still talking about it. And I think it was, by that time, I think once I found out that there were 2 different groups that had the money and wanted to do it,
Yeah.
it was like, okay, they already wanted to put a team there. There's clearly the interest from the league. There's obviously interest from fans. They've got the arena. They've got all this other stuff. They've got like all that infrastructure. There are 2 different groups that want it. So there's like kind of a bidding war.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it ended up getting announced in September of that year. And I think the reason that the Bethals got the edge over the other group
Yeah.
is because even though the Bethals, and this is kind of a way long way of circling back to what we started by talking about how there's not, a connection between the Blazers and the Fire,
Yeah.
but the Bethals are pretty significant minority investors in the Kings. So
Yeah.
they do have NBA ties. And
Yeah.
so
It is
they
funny how they have ties in an NBA team that is named after royalty.
right, yeah, what's I mean, I
Just
but
going back to
but
that little tidbit.
right, but it was like because like the NBA's board of governors has to even though the NBA and the WNBA are two different leagues, it would still be NBA's board of governors that has to approve these expansion teams.
Yep.
And so usually when there's an expansion team that has to get approved, the NBA's like finance committee has to like vet them and make sure their money is all, where it needs to be and that they can have a team.
Yep.
With the Bethals, because they had been part of the NBA's ownership family for 10 years at that point, they didn't really have to vet them because everybody kind of knew their money was good. And so it was pretty
Yep.
easy to just like fast track that process and just kind of rubber stamp it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably the same as Larry Tannenbaum here in
Right.
Toronto because he's had such a stake in not just the Raptors, but MLSE also owns the Toronto Maple Leafs, and like the CFL team here and the MLS team. And so, yeah, I think, his thing in that kind of helped. And yeah, I think it's interesting given the fact that, like, so Toronto gets announced in May. Portland gets announced later that year. They're both set to come into the league in 2026, but they're on these very different timelines. And I think one of the biggest conversations in the past year and a half that we've been talking about these teams and they've been going through these processes, like the very different timelines that they're on, and even like Portland being like quote unquote behind. And so, I mean, we just heard the news of their general manager being hired, which funny enough was someone that they got from Golden State
Yeah.
to come over. And so like now with that settled and set away, do you still think that Portland is somewhat behind, or do you think they're kind of catching up to where Toronto is in terms of like process?
I think they're still behind to a degree.
Yeah.
I feel a lot less concerned about it. Given who they hired as their GM. I
Yes.
think that was just an absolute home run hire that they made with Vanya Chernovitz.
Yeah.
Because my concern had been that they like Toronto hired a GM in February
Mhm.
and they've built out a whole front office staff since then.
Yeah, there's a lot of
And so they've had the whole this whole season to really start scouting and prepping for the expansion draft. I think they've already started interviewing head coaching candidates.
Yeah.
And if you look at the timing, because I was following this all very closely when Golden State was first getting their stuff rolled out. They announced Ohema as their general manager in May of 2024, like right around the start of last season.
Yeah.
So
So like a year.
so she had the whole season to get ready for the expansion draft in December, and she kind of had a lot more time to get that going. Now, a big, thing that I think has to be talked about here is, another way that Portland was behind the curve was
President.
Toronto had a team president in place when they launched. Like
Yeah.
Teresa Resch was already like, and she was
The
one of
Raptors.
Masai's people, so like
She was like Masai's, I think it was like Masai, Bobby,
and
and
then
then Teresa. Yeah.
yeah. So that was like somebody that clearly like was known and was, respected and had a lot of credibility and, that was there right when they launched.
Mhm.
Portland took 7 months to hire a team president.
Yeah.
And the person that they hired, Inky Sun, who was with the NBPA before that, they let her go after 3 months.
Yeah.
And in
That
the
was
meantime, they pretty much didn't have any other support staff hired. Like I think they hired a social media manager in that time.
sure.
That's like all they have. Like they still like they don't even have their own PR person yet. They still have like
Well, neither do the Tempo, so it's not like yeah.
and let me tell you, as somebody who's been like trying to cover this stuff, that's kind of tough
Yeah.
to work through without like an in-house person. But it's like that. I think I don't know exactly what happened with Inky. I think it was just a case of like, from what I understand, like I don't think there was like anything she did that caused her to be fired as much as it was, one of those situations where maybe somebody interviews for the job better than they actually are able to
Been there.
job, which happens.
Been there.
It happens in. I mean, it's the Adrian Griffin when Adrian
Yep.
Griffin got the Bucks job.
Yep,
It's
exactly.
it's like one of those types of things where but like when you're launching a team, you're already on kind of a 6 month time your behind the other team that's launching. You can't miss
Mhm.
on that hire, and
No.
they missed on that hire for
Yeah.
whatever reason, whatever happened with her. They took a long time to hire her, and then they obviously after 3 months for whatever reason decided that wasn't the right fit. So they're behind the curve anyway. And meanwhile, they're trying to hire, a GM. And from what I understand, a lot of the people that they were trying to reach out to and talking to were just kind of like, I'm good.
Eh,
I don't know. I don't know. Like, they're
it's a
so
little
like,
sus over there.
yeah. So like, when you look at, I think another thing that has kind of hurt them is you kind of have to compare everything to Golden State
Yeah,
and
especially with how well they've done.
every single thing Golden State has done, like both, obviously like the branding stuff has been all great. All the off court stuff and like the way that like the way that they've marketed like the Valhalla thing has been
Yep.
awesome. All their games have sold out. Like it's great.
Mhm.
And then also the on court stuff. It's like they're gonna probably make the playoffs as an expansion team, which never happens really in any sport. And
Yep.
they obviously like Natalie Nakase is probably gonna win Coach of the Year. You know, they've just every single thing they've done has just been a home run across the board. And the Bethals have been, I think, because they own both the Thorns and the Fire now, have been pushing this line. They pushed it when they broke ground in April on their joint practice facility for the two teams. It's going to open up next year. They
Mhm.
had a conference called this at the Nike campus in Beaverton a
Yep.
month ago. But their whole thing is their marketing tagline is basically that Portland is the global epicenter for women's sports. Like that's the line that they're pushing. Which I mean, I understand it because they're the ownership group that has the women, professional teams in both leagues, and Nike is here, Adidas is here. Like I understand
Yeah.
where you're
Yeah.
coming from and why you
Yeah.
would push that, but
Yeah.
if you're going to be using that as your line, your rollout of your team had better be to the level of Golden State, because like Golden State set the standard for these expansion teams, and now if you're not living up to that standard, you're kind of behind.
Yeah. So then,
So
like, who else to go then hire for your general
no,
manager?
that's why I was so, I guess, encouraged by who they ended up getting as their general manager, because even putting aside where they got her from, which hiring somebody from the most successful expansion team in recent history of any sport, men's or women's, like
Yep.
is not a bad idea. But also, just given the more I read, I'm still in the process of learning more about her career and more about her background.
Yeah.
But the more I learn about her, the more I just really like her background, and I like kind of the way that she has kind of come up. And just given the way that the game is going, both on the men's side and on the women's side,
Yeah.
it's becoming so international
Mhm.
that bringing someone. I mean, you look at the success that the Valkyries have had. You look at how many different countries people on their, like, they have a few French players. They've got Xander Lucini. They've got like Kemi Fagbenle. They've got all these players from all over the world.
Yep. They have
And
a Canadian.
yeah, they do. Letitia Amir here. They
Mhm.
have to, like, I have to think. I don't know how, like, who influenced what as far as the expansion draft, but I would have to think that Vanya had at least something to do with some of the, that emphasis. And you look at the results on the court. Like I said, they're going to make the playoffs probably as an expansion team.
Yeah.
So I just think it's kind of a smart. Like the thing I had been worried about with the Bethals, just based on some of the stuff they've done with the Thorns and just kind of some of the messaging, I was a little bit worried that they were going to make a hire for a GM and then eventually for a head coach that was like a name that would like win the press conference and win the
Mm.
PR push, and that
Yeah.
they would be more focused on that than they would be on who they should actually hire that would be the best person at the job.
Yes, yeah.
That was kind of the thing I was worried about, and that was where the timing and kind of how behind the curve they were came from, because my thought had been like, oh, they're going to hire somebody who isn't going to be prepared for the expansion draft and isn't going to know the player pool and isn't going to know like how the draft works and is going to have to be playing catch up. Hiring Vanya makes me not really worried about that anymore, because she
No.
literally just went through that with
Yep.
Golden State and has literally just conducted an expansion draft and knows the player pool probably better than anybody else they could have hired. So from that sense, I think like I feel a lot less worried about them being behind the curve now after that hire. And I think the other thing I have to mention here, I don't think we brought her up yet, but when they did let go of Inky Sun, the person that they brought in as their interim team president was a woman named Claire Hamill, who she recently retired from Nike, but she was at Nike for 40 years. She was the global VP of their women's division at one point.
Wow.
So about as heavy of a hitter in the industry as you could get. Like somebody who's got a lot of credibility, somebody who like people are going to return her phone calls.
Yep.
And she actually she was at the Vanya press conference the other day, and she said that like even though technically her title is still interim president, she pretty much implied that like she's not going anywhere, and this isn't a short term thing. Like she had a tattoo. Like it's pretty awesome. It's this woman. I don't know exactly how old she is. I think she's in her like late 60s, early 70s or something. But she's like had a tattoo on her forearm of the Fire logo, and she was like, "No, you see the tattoo? I'm all in." So like.
She got a tattoo.
Yeah, and it was like a whole thing. They posted on social media of her getting the tattoo, but then like I saw that I saw that and I was like, oh, this is probably just like a temporary thing. It's like a social media gimmick. I saw her at the press conference. That tattoo is not temporary. She got a tattoo of the logo right on her forearm. So
imagine I just like get this on my
right, exactly. But so the fact, and from what I understand, like, and they had that event, the epicenter of women's sports conference that they had, which I went to, and I think a lot of that was focused on selling the team to brands and to potential corporate sponsors and trying to get like community leaders excited about it.
Yeah.
From talking to folks there, I think a lot of those types of people who need to be reassured with this stuff after kind of how messy the first part of the launch was, a lot of them felt a lot better and a lot more comfortable with where things were headed because Claire Hamill was on board.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know if she had a relationship with Vanya before. I don't know like what that what that was, but I think just given everything that happened, I think having somebody like Claire in the room who again worked at Nike for 40 years and was the president of their entire women's division for decades, having somebody like that in the room saying, hey, like I'm part of this, you should get on board. I think that probably, if people had questions about where things were headed under the the first part of the launch, I think so having somebody like that on board and have somebody like that vouching for it, I think reassures a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, definitely looking at it from the outside, and as someone who has like a very microscopic look at the Toronto Tempo's process as well, like it definitely feels like they're catching up quite a lot. And it's interesting to me given, I mean, these teams are going to be compared regardless, and I mean there's an argument to say that they might be a little bit of a natural rivalry that goes into them next season just because they are the two like first year teams, which will be fun. But it's interesting to me to see how they're operating differently. And I guess obviously with Toronto being the first international team, they have that whole international angle to go on. They have the whole like Canada's team thing. They're going to be playing in different cities other than Toronto. They just announced a few weeks ago that they're going to be playing 2 regular season home games in Vancouver next year, which I feel like I hope one of them would be against Portland because I feel like that would be really fun just to get the West Coast fans kind of. Yeah, and I mean
Vancouver's about 5 hours from Portland.
Yeah,
I haven't been. I've gone to Seattle a couple times this year for different Storm games that when they lined up with my schedule. That's about 3 hours. I haven't been to Vancouver in a number of years, but if the Fire play in Vancouver next year, I'll drive up for that.
Yeah, exactly. And that was like the big thing because I was there in Vancouver for the Storm Dream game. And I mean, most of the media there was people who had driven up from Seattle because it was like 2 hours away. And so I feel like they could really use, take advantage of that kind of situation, playing in Vancouver. But yeah, it's just two very different messages that they're giving with these two teams. Like you said, like Portland is trying to say, like, we're the epicenter of women's sports. Toronto's trying to say, okay, we're globalizing this league and we're
Mhm.
bringing Canada into the WNBA, which I think is going to be really fun. But yeah, I think, where Toronto is at now in terms of their process, like I know that they're hiring like a very expansive basketball strategy department right now. And they're just going all in on like, because I mean, they just hired Eli Horowitz as well, who wasn't the assistant GM in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
but his thing is all about like analytics, strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're just leaning into that quite a lot. But I mean, the next step for both of these teams is a head coach. And that's a very interesting conversation to get in, especially given the head coaching market from last year, where like half the teams in the league let
Right.
go of their head coach. And then you had, Golden State coming in who also needed a head coach. And I think it's going to be such an interesting market given obviously in the next, I would say like 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to start seeing which teams from this year are going to let go of their head coaches, which
Seattle.
I mean, I wasn't gonna say it, but yeah, there's like a few teams that are definitely on that list of like, okay, they're gonna be in the market as well. I'm curious for you if you think, because Golden State went the route of, okay, they found who's the best team in the WNBA right now, Las Vegas. Let's go and find their top assistant, bring them over. I mean, it just worked out that Natalie Nakase is from California, all of that kind of stuff, and it's worked out so, so well. For you, like, what do you think is going to be the strategy going into a head coach? Do you think that they're going to go that same route and try and find someone who's already integrated into the league? Or do you think they're going to go and take that international approach or even college approach and try and pull someone who has never been in the league?
I mean, given what Vanya's background is, it would not
Yeah.
surprise me at all if they went the international route, kind of like Connecticut did with bringing in
Mhm.
Rashid Nezion.
Yeah.
I could I could see her doing that, but I mean, she has such a the thing is like that's like the kind of the thing everybody kind of knows of her, like her background, but also like she was also an international scout with the Bulls, so like she has some
Mhm.
NBA experience, so maybe she draws from that pool. Maybe
Mm.
she does draw from the college pool. I
Yeah.
personally, if it were me, I might kind of try to take the same approach that Golden State did and say, and really with with what Golden State did with their GM too, where they were like,
Yep.
"Who's the best front office in the W? Probably the Liberty. Let's hire their assistant GM." Like,
I mean, that's what Toronto kind of did too. They went to Phoenix and they said, "Hey,
yeah,
Monica, like, come
yeah,
on over."
yeah. No, that was a really smart hire too. I thought
Yeah.
by them, but yeah, I honestly I have no idea what they're gonna do as their for their head coaching
Yeah.
hire. Like that's they got their GM. I think again, who they hired as their GM, I think makes me a lot more comfortable that like if they hired her, that means that they're gonna let her make her own coaching hire. And it's
Yeah.
not gonna be a situation where they try to make a splash and bring in a name and, you know,
Yeah.
try to, do something like that where maybe it wouldn't be the best, basketball hire.
Yeah,
I have
exactly.
some names that I've been worried about that I'm probably not going to say on here,
Yeah, that's fair.
but they're the fact that they hired who they hired as their GM makes me a lot more, I guess, encouraged by what the process is probably going to look like when it comes to hiring a head coach.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I talked to both Monica and Eli a few weeks ago and was just kind of I wasn't trying to, I was just kind of poking, being like, okay, what's the
Yeah,
vibe
yeah,
here? And yeah, I think there's been such a change in trends when it comes to who WNBA teams are hiring over the past few years. I think in recent years you would have suspected them to just either go with head assistants or people or like previous players or people who were coming up in the assistant coaching pipeline. Now they've just it's kind of broken open. You're seeing college coaches come over despite, college coaching being very lucrative and very different over there. You have people coming in from Europe because the game is expanding so much. But then in Canada, we also have this like very built out basketball community of people here, and both Monica and Eli were kind of saying that they want their head coach to kind of have the pulse of what's going on in Canada and in the basketball communities here. So I think what I'm thinking of in these trends, and I would suspect that both Portland and Toronto make a head coaching hire before the expansion draft, would be I don't think they're going to be the same at all, but I do think they're going to have very like intentional um thought. And when you see that head coach hire, I think you're going to have a very clear indication of where both of these teams are going. And I think it's so interesting that they're going to be in the same expansion draft because we're going to be able to compare their strategy quite a lot, because they're going to have the same pool. And I mean, we don't know the rules of the expansion draft yet, but they're going to have the same rules, the same player pool to pick from, the same parameters. They're probably going to go back and forth in terms of who they're allowed to pick. I think it's going to be a much more of a dynamic process than Golden State's were, because with Golden State, it was like, okay, it's the expansion draft, but they just like kind of came out to a podium and they're like, here's the players we picked because we're the only team and we could have done whatever we wanted. So we've chosen these. They've been picked for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I watched the expansion draft broadcast, and pretty much the only part of it that was enjoyable was E40 saying the name Temi Fagbenle.
Yeah.
The pronunciation of that was pretty fun.
Yeah. I like the idea of them having people from the area, like, saying, but I'm like, you decided this like 2 weeks ago. Like, this isn't a draft. You're just announcing who you picked.
Yeah, and by the way, like I am like 99% certain. Speaking of Temi Fagbenle, I'm like 99% certain that if she isn't protected in the expansion draft, that's going to be somebody that Portland tries to get because she played for the London Lions when Vanya was the GM there. So
there you go.
That's the only thing I have as far as like the GM hire providing a clue as to who they might go after. That's the only kind of.
See, I get the tea leaves of, okay, which Canadians are they going to go after? Because if any team lets one of those Canadians go free, I mean, Kia Nurse is a free agent, and I mean, I think Letitia Amahir is also a free agent, but like, that's the whole thing with Washington trading Aaliyah Edwards, that I was like, they need to find something to do to get something back for Aaliyah Edwards, because if they don't protect her, she's getting snatched by Toronto. Like, that is not even a question of what Toronto will do given Aaliyah Edwards as a player. If Minnesota doesn't protect Bridget Carleton, that's another one. And so you kind of have that indication of where Toronto might go in the expansion draft.
They're gonna, because I know that the Raptors like to do that too with like they brought in RJ, like they like to bring in a lot of the Canadian guys. Is like, you think that's gonna be, because I'm kind of, maybe part of this is that I'm just really annoyed by a lot of our local legacy media here that has no imagination and is just like, as soon as it was announced that Portland was getting a team, a lot of them were like, they should hire Kelly Graves as their head coach, and they should get Sabrina, they should get Cameron Brink, they should just like naming every like local player. That, not that those players wouldn't be great to get, obviously, but like,
you're like, think outside the box.
I just don't like this. Like, you would never, if there was an expansion team in a men's league, you would never be saying, let's just get everybody with local ties that people have heard of. Like,
no, I think it's different. I think it's different because we're in Canada and there's like a certain pride that comes with that. And it's like not just an area or a state, it's like a country and a citizenship. And the reality is that these Canadian players virtually never get the opportunity to play in their home country. It's the same as a lot of the international players, but Europeans have a league, Australians have a league. Like, there are those, but this is the first time in professional basketball that these women are going to have the chance to represent their home country, their home city, if they're from Toronto. And so I think there's a difference, not only for the players, that they have like that beneficial back and forth of, okay, we know that you want to be here and want to represent, but it also is such a big thing these days with fans, especially, I'm not going to get into everything going on politically, but like, Canadian pride is a big thing these days. And so having those players come, I think, is also going to be a big draw for fans as well. So I think it's a good decision, especially when you think about how well a lot of these players coming out of the Canadian system are doing in the next, decade, for them to really prioritize and focus on bringing those Canadian talents home, and like the whole marketability of all of that. And so, I mean, I think that's why I think they lean, and it's not as, like, say, cheesy, or as, like,
Sure,
out
sure.
like, not out of the box as saying, "Okay, let's bring everybody who's ever played in the Pacific Northwest to come
Right,
to Portland."
right,
But yeah, I think just a little bit different, given I think Canada in general, but also just where we're at currently, just like in the world, bringing Canadians around. And I think it also ties in to the growth of the Canadian national programs as well.
right.
I think the Raptors have really leaned into trying to bring people like RJ Barrett and, all of those guys, I could list them, back, because the Canadian programs are doing so well on the global stage that you want that connection between the Olympic team and your
Mhm.
country's professional team. And so it's smart, honestly, because the jerseys sell, the people come, they have that back and forth, and that those players want to be there, because there's, again, this whole discourse about having to move to Canada and having to, like, whoa, moving across the
Right,
border and having to pay income tax is so crazy to people.
right.
But yeah, so I think that makes it a little bit different, and why I don't know if the Temple will go after every Canadian on the market, but I do think they're really gonna lean into having at least 1 or 2 to be like the face of the team, and really bring that connection in between the Canadian national team and the Canadian fans and the WNBA.
Well, the thing that I'm actually the most curious about is with both of Portland and Toronto is just kind of what their goals are gonna be
Mhm.
for that first season, because are they gonna do what Golden State did and actually build a team that's gonna be competitive and is gonna be in the playoffs? Or, I don't know, that 2027 draft class is pretty good. Like,
Juju, juju.
maybe try
Literally.
maybe, like, because I think, like, I know this is the case in Portland, and I would assume it's probably the case in Toronto too, but
Mhm.
that first year, they're not gonna have any trouble selling tickets. Like, people are gonna
No.
the team exists, and if the team isn't
No.
good, nobody's going to expect the team to be good, because expansion teams are never good unless it's Golden State.
Exactly.
So, do you try to, like, be good right away and be competitive right away and try to make the playoffs, or do you try to
Juju.
get Juju Watkins or somebody like that? Like, do you try to do that? Because, I mean,
Tank for
eh,
Juju.
that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to
No.
expansion team with somebody like that as, like, the face of the franchise after the first year. So I wonder what that's going to be, because I know that like, some of the players that the Valkyries drafted didn't come over.
Yeah. That, like,
And
their number 5 pick didn't come over.
that's the yeah, that Lithuanian, what's her, I forget what her.
Just Stay Joy, I'm
Yeah, yeah,
not saying
yeah.
this right, but Just
She's a
Stay
pe-
Joy
she's a,
Sweat.
she's supposed to be
Great
really
player.
she's supposed to
Great
be really
player.
good, but that was, if you were a team that was, building your first expansion roster expecting to get a lottery pick, you're more okay with drafting somebody who maybe in the first round who's maybe not going to come over right away, because then it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if they help you win the first year or not.
Yeah, but I
So,
also think that the 2026 draft is so much more, like, deep when it comes to the first
uh,
round than this year's was. Like, this year was very top heavy with Paige and,
yeah,
with Kiki and Malonga and even Sonia and all of that, but then when you got to 5 and it was a little bit more open, whereas next year, you have players like AZ, Lauren Betts, Flauge, like, it just goes on and on and on, and I think, it's also a great opportunity to take someone at I think Toronto and Portland will be at 6 and 7. You could really take someone that's, like, gonna end up being a really, really great player down the line. So, yeah, but I am heavily manifesting Juju Watkins to the Toronto Tempo, and she's a Tempo until proven otherwise, quite
sure,
honestly. Like,
sure.
that would be such a chasmic culture building for any team. Like, you think about, it's like Caitlin Clark, you think about Paige Beckers coming in and changing the game for Dallas. Having Juju Watkins, who is, was a sophomore in college and was already investing in Unrivaled, already
Yeah,
has a signature shoe deal. Like, just cosmic level of
yeah.
team culture. I think any team is going to be chomping at the bit to try and get that, unless you are a Minnesota or one of these teams that is also good enough to win a championship. So
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if Toronto and Portland are kind of given that. Okay, like
Especially because Juju is you want to talk about like this is kind of a stretch, and this local tie has never helped the Blazers get free agents before, but Juju is a pretty heavily featured Nike signature athlete, and Nike
mhm.
is in Portland, so I could see that
Yeah.
being kind of
There's so many ties though. She's an LA person and
yeah.
LA, LA has the
Sparks are
spark.
probably not going to be good next year either. So
So that's a possibility.
it's
You
a good
also have all of these trades going on with picks these days that
yeah,
it's like, I mean, Minnesota's gonna have a lottery pick next year. So it's like
yeah.
it's wild to think about the dynamics of all of that. And I mean, man,
Have you ever seen Juju play in person?
no, pff, dreams.
She they had the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 of
Yes.
the tournament last year in Portland, and
Yeah.
so I went to a couple of those games. And
Before she got injured.
no, this was after this. No, this was last her
Oh,
freshman year.
this is her freshman year.
Her
Okay.
freshman year, but it was the when they played UConn in the
That was such
oh
a good game.
yeah, no,
Such
I
a
was
good game.
man, I was at that game, and she's
Whew.
yeah, and
Uh,
also just honestly, like if you want to talk about like face of the franchise stuff, I was at a lot of those press conferences and stuff that Juju did afterwards, and
yep.
she's she's got that stuff. She's very impressive on the
Does.
front too. Like I was like, oh,
Exactly.
this girl's 19, like she's very,
Yeah.
she's a
Yeah.
professional already. So
Well, yeah, that's with a lot of them coming out. You think about Paige, you think about all these like AZ,
Cameron
all these
Brink, yeah,
Cameron Brink who grew up, went to college during the NIL era. They kind of had to be
yeah,
like during this thing where their sport is automatic or just suddenly launched into, the sphere that it is now. You kind of end up having to learn those PR skills and
yeah.
learn that face of the franchise. Because I mean, college teams aren't franchises, but they're still like they operate almost the same as teams. So you kind of learn how to be the face of a team
The
when you're someone like that.
the big programs like UConn and USC and Notre Dame
Yeah.
kind of do operate. And the thing that's interesting then is that like there's a lot of these international players that are coming in a lot younger than that. Like I said, I've
Yeah.
gone to a handful of Storm games this year, and
Mhm.
Malonga's 19. Like she's
Yeah.
a lot younger than a lot of these other players that come in. And
Yep.
when they have her up on the podium, you can tell she's a lot more raw and a lot less media trained than like,
Yeah.
you know, Neko Ogumake is a bad example because she's the president of the players union, so she's like the most media trained of anybody. But even
When you compare to other rookies, like say
sure,
like, Kiki or Paige or all of these people in
right,
that class.
right, like these players that like have been at like big time college programs and have like all the media exposure that you could have
Yeah.
ever wanted, like coming into the league, and are also there's a difference between being 22 and being 19.
Oh, a huge
Like
difference.
to use an NBA example, like I remember when Dame came in as a rookie. He was a 4-year college player at Michigan
Yeah.
State, so he was 22 when he came in, and then
Yep.
last 3 years ago, you want to talk about another Canadian
Mhm.
when the Blazers drafted Shaden Sharp,
Yep.
who was at Kentucky but didn't actually play in
Yep.
Kentucky that year.
Yep.
He had like basically no media training, and so whenever you would ask him anything, he would just be like total deer in the headlights, like didn't know
Yeah.
what he was supposed to do. Like he's gotten more comfortable as it's gone on, but there's a big difference unless you're like a just freakishly like mature and
Mature.
polished for that age, like like LeBron was when he came into the league, or somebody like that.
Yeah.
There's such a like 19 to 22 is such a difference in like
Yeah.
maturity and brain development and just
Which is
ability to navigate this stuff.
Yeah, which obviously most of the WNBA players who come into the draft are that age, which I think
Yeah,
is why you see such a quicker turnaround of how fast teams can get better when they have a pick like that. I mean, you think about Indiana just getting Caitlin Clark and like the turnaround that they've had as well. But I mean, it's super interesting to think about the next few years and the draft prospects that are coming out and the fact that both Toronto and Portland will be fully into the running for those. I know next year they're not really in the running for first picks
right.
because of just like the rules, but 2027 and beyond, I mean, it's fair game. And so yeah, that's going to be so interesting to think about. But I mean, we could probably go on and on about all of this, and I'm
Yeah,
sure we will as we get closer to the expansion draft and all that stuff, and it's fun as someone in an expansion city, to have someone to
Yeah.
compare notes with you in Portland. So I definitely appreciate you coming on and taking the time to chop it up and talk expansion with me.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I'm still kind of new-ish to the W world, like, just in
Yeah.
general. Like, I've always, like, watched it casually, but really the last couple of years since I've gotten, like, a good idea that Portland was gonna get a team, I've started
Mhm.
watching it a lot more seriously and following it a lot more seriously. So it's been fun to kind of to get more immersed in this world. It's a very different, this is a whole other podcast, but
Yeah, literally.
it's a very different world of like covering it from a media standpoint than the NBA is. I just went
Oh,
to
it
the
is.
All-Star game in Indy for the
Yeah.
first time this year. It was also a very different vibe than various NBA All-Star games I've been to.
Yep.
So it's been fun to kind of get more immersed into this world in more of a professional way. So it's something I'm definitely as this, whenever, which we haven't even talked about the CBA stuff yet. We don't even know when the expansion draft is going to be, let alone what the
Exactly.
rules are going to be. But as all that stuff gets closer, and once these teams have a coach and B have players, there's definitely going to be a lot more to kind of unpack here. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's we're ramping up for sure. Like, it's about to get really busy. And hopefully, I mean, yeah, the CBA is a big part of that. But we're gonna call it here for today. Thank you so much, Sean, for coming on to our podcast here on Her Hoop Stats. And for anybody listening, make sure to follow Sean over on the other various social media platforms to get all of the updated news about Portland, the Portland Fire, all of the updates along who they're hiring and expansion and all of that stuff. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. If you're listening, make sure to follow and check us out over on herhoopstats.com for all of the latest stats, newsletters, and all of that as well. We will see you back Monday for a new week of the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Thanks for watching.